So speaking of legacy car makers, we have Ford who announced that they are shutting down production of their all electric F-150. They're moving it to, I don't know if this like currently exists, but it's like a hybrid car, but it's not a hybrid car where it's an electric motor and then it has a gas generator inside of it. I'm not
Oh,
too familiar on the hybrid system, so I don't know if this is new or not.
this
Uh,
is, I think, the path that Scout is doing as well, where it has a generator that it could generate electricity to still power the same electric motors, right?
yeah,
Or it powers the batteries, which end up powering the electric motors. That is slightly different than the Honda or the I'm sorry, the Prius style of hybrid that was introduced by Toyota, and the vast majority of hybrids today are that style. Um, I haven't read up much about it because in my view, the hybrid model makes very little sense. You have sort of uh, it makes sense from the perspective of if you um, if you didn't have a charging network that is already pretty solid, then you would need something to get to for long distances. Get your buyers who are very concerned about range anxiety to get them through road trips, right? So when you buy a car, you might take a road trip 2 or 3 times a year, if that. But that is an absolute requirement for you to be able to take your vehicle on a road trip. And with Teslas, you can do that because of the charging network. And now they've opened up their charging network to other EV makers. So the hybrid path, from my perspective, is very short-sighted. And these companies that are going back to hybrids are are going to be the ones that are not making the right investments to be relevant in the future. So Ford would be on my bet list that 15 years from now, there's a good likelihood that Ford and GM, neither one of them will make it.
yeah. I mean, Ford. I think they still have the Mustang Mach-E, so they're still making electric vehicles. But I know the Ford F-150 all electric was supposed to be like a big push for them, and it seems like the
Yeah.
sales just weren't there. So if you were running Ford, would you continue to produce a car that's not selling well, and just because you kind of are where the future's going, or what do you do?
That's a great question. Yeah, and I think I've mentioned this book before, The Innovator's Dilemma, Clay Christensen's book, which was written in the 90s. And I read that book in the 90s. And to me, it's sort of a foregone conclusion that a lot of these companies that basically have entered in late and have the DNA for a particular type of technology, which for Ford and GM and other internal combustion engine vehicles, they have the DNA on how to build these awesome mechanical vehicles that have these gearboxes and fuel injections that systems that are like absolutely top notch mechanical systems. So like you can't take that expertise and translate it to EVs. You just can't. And all of their executives have grown up in that type of environment. And this is why Clay Christensen, in his Innovator's Dilemma, sort of shows how predictable it is that these companies end up going bankrupt. And um, so that's the way I view it. It would be hard to change the culture of Ford to all of a sudden become an EV company without killing all of its existing revenue. And these are challenges because you can't kill your existing revenue to become an EV company because you're not selling any EVs. So you have to continue to innovate and sell internal combustion engine vehicles and still have those executives and talent and all of that, and still draw that kind of talent, by the way, into your company. But at the same time, you have to be building new talent in these areas that you have zero expertise in. No senior executives that understand this other disruptive technology, and how do you even do it? And so in a way, their paths might be like predetermined and pre-written in
Mhm.
destiny. And I don't know if I could save or if anybody could save Ford, right? Maybe the appropriate way for them to do it is to set up another unit that goes on to create these attracts the talent, and they invest in that unit, and that unit sort of operates on its own autonomously, if you will. IBM did that, by the way, when they built the original IBM PC. So IBM was a mainframe company. They were very behind on the personal computer shift, that the transition that Apple and others were starting to bring to light, and they didn't know how to catch up. They didn't know how to. They didn't have the DNA to do it. So they literally created this separate group, put ahead of that unit together that like was operating completely separate from IBM, and they built the IBM PC in 12 months, and it ended up being the number one PC maker in a very, very short period of time. And then they floundered it because it was still underneath IBM, with all of the executives still having a mainframe mindset, right? And all of the profits were coming from mainframe. So they didn't understand how to make better decisions around the PC. So eventually the competition caught up with them and surpassed them. Um, so even in those kind of scenarios, if it's still under the same company, it might still get killed. And we've already seen this happen in multiple cycles. GM created the first EV in 1999. I want to say they introduced it, called the EV1. And the customers of the EV1 loved that vehicle. They wanted to buy it, and GM ended up killing it because it cost them more than they were selling it for. And the executives didn't understand why the company was making such large investments in the EV market. So I just don't see them making this transition. And in the meantime, uh, the Ford enthusiasts and the stockholders, investors of Ford or whatever, they also don't understand this transition. So, the fact that Ford canceled their F-150 Lightning EV vehicle and will likely make less investment going forward into EVs hardly budged in terms of their stock price. Like, it should be, oh no, we're doomed, we're going down. But no, the stock actually did hardly moved, and in fact, it may have even gone up yesterday a little bit. So um, it's one of those things where their investors don't understand what's going on. The executives don't get it. The transition to EVs is happening. Just because there was a slight slowdown in the past year does not mean the transition is not real. You have to get off of fossil fuels at some point in the future. So it's a matter of time.
What do you think about not necessarily Ford, but one of these legacy car manufacturers having more of an Apple mindset where like Apple will just make tough calls on behalf of their users, and then they have such a strong brand that their users will stick with them. So, for example, when they ripped out the CD-ROM drive, which was a very big deal, or stopped supporting Flash, or moved off of Intel, um, do you think a car company should just shift gears, pun intended, and be like, okay, we're only producing EVs from now on? Or maybe it's similar to their Intel to Apple Silicon transition, where it's like, here's our timeline of these cars are going to slowly phase out and we're only going to sell electric models. Do you think that's maybe a winning formula, or will that kind of destroy their consumer base?
Ford has been kind of trying to do that, right? With the Ford Mustang E,
Yeah.
and then their F-150 Lightning was an optional thing, right? So um, the question is, how long do you continue investing in it when that division is losing a ton of money? And I think Ford's write-off was roughly $20 billion that they had invested and had carried goodwill on their balance sheet into the Ford F-150 EV bit version, and now they're abandoning it. So $20 billion write-off, $20 billion investment that basically went nowhere. So, all of the executives inside, and these arguments, you can imagine these arguments took place, that like nobody wants an electric truck, right? These arguments took place at Ford many years ago, 6, 7, 8 years ago, when they started, the project on the F-150 Lightning. And all of those executives are dancing right now saying, see, we were right. You should listen to us more, right? So now the shift to being more entrenched in hybrids and gas powered vehicles is even greater in these companies. It's ironic, right? Like
Great point.
the, Kodak had the same sort of thing happen where they made the first digital cameras, but those digital cameras cost them money, and the division that was making digital cameras um, was not profitable, and they were making the biggest investment in that group. And of course, Kodak didn't understand what they have, that the future is going to be all digital cameras. And of course, what did they do? They canned their digital camera division in favor of film and their film-based cameras. My first digital camera in 1999 was a Kodak. In fact, that's how I met my ex-wife, is because I took digital cameras at an event we were at together, and I was like, "Hey, see this picture? You
Let
want
me
me
have
to
your
send
number
it
so
to
I
you?"
could send it to you. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I had to get her email at the time,
Right.
but people didn't have cell phones. I'm very old, but you can't imagine that world. Dustin.
No, no, I can't picture it.
Yeah. But anyway,
I mean, what
these
Kodak needed
transitions.
to do is they needed to make phones, it turns out, not digital cameras, right? If they really wanted to
To
compete.
skip two
Yeah.
disruptive technologies. But so like Ford, I think I mentioned this last time, but four disruptive technologies are happening in the car industry at the same time. Just one of them is this shift to EV. Another is the software-driven vehicles. Another is the autonomous capabilities, and then another is what autonomous capabilities enables in ride sharing and vehicle sharing. So these are four distinct disruptive technologies, any one of which could take out all of the existing leaders, but all four are happening simultaneously. Now, the way in which this is playing out is over decades. Um, but we're already probably a decade into it, and then it might have another decade, maximum 2 decades left. So, maybe there's 10 to 20 years on the high side. I can't imagine 20 years from now 90% of the market is not electric. Um, you know, it's just hard to conceive that, for me anyway. A lot of people think this electric thing is a fad, and 90% of cars will still continue to be gas based, but that's just not my view.